Imagine the scene. It's 1975, and Emperor Hirohito, a man once revered as a living deity, the silent sun around which an entire empire revolved, is standing in the middle of Disneyland. He isn't surrounded by generals or draped in the stoic regalia of the shogunate. Instead, he's standing next to Mickey Mouse. For the older generation, those who clung to the Yamato Damashi spirit, it was a moment of stinging humiliation. But for the youth watching on their glowing TV screens, something shifted. They didn't see a war criminal or a fallen god. They saw a cute old man. It's a bizarre image, but it's the exact moment Japan began to trade its swords for ribbons. We've been taught to see Kawaii as a harmless aesthetic of pink lace and oversized eyes, a sugary escape from the pressures of modern life. In Harajuku, it started as a rebellion. You had the Garu girls with their neon hair and defiant makeup, explicitly rejecting the submissive, pure image of the traditional Japanese woman. They were loud, they were messy, and they were free. But then the atmosphere changed. Someone pointed out the global icon of this movement. Hello, Kitty. First glance, she's the pinnacle of lovable. But look closer, she has no mouth. Her hands are soft, rounded nubs, incapable of gripping a tool or a weapon. Suddenly, the cuteness starts to feel less like a fashion choice and more like a surgical procedure. That instant shift from a tool of rebellion to a standardized mask is where the real story begins. Why did the Japanese state start using kawaii-fied mascots to explain away the horrors of the Fukushima nuclear disaster? And why does this culture demand that women remain frozen in a state of permanent childhood just to stay productive? It makes you realize that kawaii might not be an escape from the past at all. It might be the ultimate return to the repressed, a way to hide a dark, traumatic history behind a face that is intentionally, perfectly powerless.
I mean, just hearing that laid out, it really forces you to reframe everything you think you know about cute culture.
I have to be honest, just reading that opening text, it hits completely different.
Yeah, it's heavy.
You see the picture of the emperor and the mouse, and your brain just wants to categorize it as, funny or surreal. Yeah. It's basically meme material today.
Right, totally meme material.
But framing it as a moment of stinging humiliation for one generation, and then this complete rebranding for another, that really sets a very specific table for this deep dive today.
It does, and I'm glad you caught that tension immediately, because that photo is arguably the pivot point of modern Japanese history.
A pivot point, okay.
Yeah. We often think of cute or kawaii as this trivial thing, stickers, plushies, maid cafes, the things you buy in a Tokyo airport gift shop.
Right, it's just flavor.
Exactly. But what we're going to unpack today is that kawaii isn't just a flavor, it's a survival strategy.
A survival strategy. That sounds like we're talking about camouflage in a jungle, not a cartoon cat.
Well, in a way, we are talking about camouflage. If you look at the sociology and the political science behind this, it's a massive, complex negotiation. We're looking at how a nation that was labeled the villain of Asia in 1945, a terrifying military aggressor, managed to transform itself into this harmless, lovable cultural superpower in the span of just 40 years.
So the argument is that the cuteness was the actual vehicle for that transformation. Like, they didn't just stumble into being cute, but that it served a very deliberate function.
It's a rebranding campaign, and honestly, maybe the most successful one in human history.
Wow.
We're going to trace this from its origins, which surprisingly started as a punk rock-style teenage rebellion.
The Kawaii girls in Harajuku.
Exactly, all the way up to the government co-opting it as soft power. And we really have to get into the gender politics, too. Like, why is being powerless seen as the ultimate good in this system?
And we can't forget the samurai. I know we have to talk about Jitageki, and I want to know exactly how that fits in with the pink ribbons and the mascots.
We definitely cannot skip that. The clash between cute Japan and the old samurai Japan is essentially a battle for the soul of the country.
I'm totally hooked. But before we get to the government conspiracies and the mouthless cats, we need to set the scene. Because Japan wasn't always the land of anime and cute mascots.
No, definitely not.
There was a moment where the Made in Japan brand meant something very, very different to the rest of the world.
Right. To understand the cute, you have to understand the crash. We need to go back to the late 1990s and the early 2000s.
The lost decade.
Yes, the lost decade. Though honestly, it's been more like the lost 20 or 30 years at this point.
I remember looking into the bubble bursting. Real estate prices in Tokyo were theoretically worth more than the entire United States at one point, weren't they?
It was absolute insanity. The Imperial Palace grounds alone were valued higher than all the real estate in the state of California.
That is just, I can't even wrap my head around that kind of wealth.
And then pop. The bubble burst in the early 90s. The banking systems were suddenly drowning in bad debt. But the psychological blow was even harder than the economic one. You have to understand, post-war Japan was built on a very specific promise.
Work hard, sacrifice for the company.
Exactly. Work hard, give your life to the corporation, and you will have lifetime employment, and Japan will dominate the globe. They were the terrifying economic giant.
Think about the sci-fi from that era in the 80s. Blade Runner, RoboCop. The future was always depicted as being owned by Japanese mega corporations. They were the big bad wolf of the global economy.
They really were. And then suddenly, Sony and Panasonic aren't the only players anymore. You had the rise of Samsung in Korea, the massive manufacturing boom in China.
Competition caught up.
Fast. The Made in Japan label, which used to mean inevitable future tech dominance, started to look a little dusky. The Walkman was replaced by the iPod. The confidence of the entire nation was shattering.
So it wasn't just a recession.
No, we aren't just talking about a dip in the GDP. We are talking about suicide rates spiking, the breakdown of the traditional family structure, a complete loss of faith in the salaryman dream.
So you have a depressed economy, an aging population, and a total loss of global prestige. It sounds like a midlife crisis on a national scale.
But right in the middle of this depression, a journalist named Douglas McGray noticed something really weird. He coined this concept called Japan's gross national cool.
Gross national cool. A play on gross national product.
Exactly. His argument was essentially, look, the banks are sinking, the politicians are completely paralyzed, but look at the kids in America. Look at the kids in Paris. What are they watching?
Pokemon. Dragon Ball Z.
Yes. What are they buying? Hello, Kitty?
True. I grew up in that era. I couldn't have named the Japanese prime minister to save my life.
Yeah.
But I knew exactly who Pikachu was. I knew who Sailor Moon was.
Right. McGray pointed out that Japan's global influence had completely decoupled from its economy. It had become a cultural superpower right at the exact moment it was failing as an economic one.
That is a wild paradox.
It is. Now, usually governments are very slow to pick up on this stuff. Bureaucracies are generally where cool goes to die.
Yeah, you don't expect a bunch of politicians to suddenly embrace an electric mouse.
But this brings me to one of the most fascinating accounts I've dug into for this deep dive. It's a story that perfectly captures the pivot from economic power to cultural power.
Oh, the diplomat story. Let's unpack this because this blew my mind.
I was reading this diplomatic memoir from a mid-level official in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs working back in the late 90s. Let's just call him Sato.
Okay, Sato.
Now, you have to picture his work environment. He is in Kasumigaseki, the main government district in Tokyo. The room is filled with cigarette smoke because in the 90s in Japan, everyone smoked indoors.
Really?
He's sitting across a heavy wooden table from his superiors.
Yeah.
These are men in their late 60s and 70s, men who grew up in the actual shadow of the war, men who rebuilt Japan with steel, coal, and automobiles.
A hard power generation. Serious men in serious suits.
Exactly. They carry that very stoic, samurai-adjacent pride. And Sato has to pitch them a brand new strategy for the 21st century. He has to look these incredibly serious men in the eye and say, gentlemen, our future isn't in semiconductors. It's in a pink cat with no mouth.
I can only imagine the dead silence in that room. It must have felt like a massive insult to them. Like we built ocean liners and bullet trains and you want us to sell little girls' dolls.
It did feel like an insult. Sato described the tension so vividly. They struggled to understand why kawaii, something they viewed as childish, overly feminine, and frankly, deeply embarrassing, should represent their great nation on the world stage.
It goes against everything they valued.
But Sato had a realization that cut right through all that tension. He realized that cuteness wasn't just a product, it was a strategic veil.
A strategic veil. Like a disguise.
Think about the geopolitical context of the time. Japan had neighbors, China, Korea, the Philippines, who still harbored deep, incredibly justified anger over World War II.
Right. The wounds were still fresh, historically speaking.
And in the West, you had that yellow peril economic fear lingering from the 80s. People were fundamentally afraid of a strong Japan, but nobody is afraid of Pikachu.
Because Pikachu is a baby. Or a pet. It's totally non-threatening.
Sato realized that if you project a non-threatening, friendly, cute image, you completely bypass those historical defenses. It's really hard to hate a country that supplies your children with their absolute favorite toys. It offered a way to essentially wash the national image.
Wow. It's brilliant, but it's also kind of cynical, isn't it? It feels highly manipulative.
Oh, it's absolutely manipulative. That's the weaponization part of this whole phenomenon. Sada saw that Kawaii could be used to effectively package Japan's complex, bloody history into something colorful, soft, and digestible.
Uses innocence as a shield.
Exactly. It uses innocence to deflect the heavy weight of the past. It's a way of silently communicating to the world, we aren't the empire anymore, we are the playground.
So did the old men in the smoky room actually go for it?
Yes, they couldn't argue with the global sales numbers. But it sparked a massive turf war within the Japanese government. And this is important because it shows how different parts of the state viewed this tool.
Who was fighting over it?
On one side, you had Merai, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry.
The business guys. The bean counters.
Right. For Meia, cool Japan was just a cash cow. They just looked at the export numbers for anime and manga, which were exploding. They wanted to treat culture exactly like they treated cars, build it, ship it, profit.
Totally transactional.
They didn't care about the soul of the art, they just wanted the receipts. But then you had MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the diplomats.
Saw those guys.
Yes, for them, this was entirely about influence. They wanted to use anime and fashion to make people like Japan. And in 2009, MOFA did something that I think perfectly illustrates both the absurdity and the genius of this strategy. They actually appointed Kawaii ambassadors.
Actual ambassadors? Like His Excellency, the Ambassador of Acute?
Yes. They officially appointed 3 young women who were fashion models to represent specific archetypes of Japanese pop culture and sent them on diplomatic tours around the world.
You have to tell me who they were and what these archetypes were?
They were very carefully selected. You had Aoki Misako representing the Lolita style, you had Kimura Yu representing Harajuku fashion, and Fujioka Shizuka representing the schoolgirl style.
Okay, we definitely need to pause on Lolita for a second, because that word carries a very, very different, much darker connotation in the West due to the Nabokov novel.
Huge distinction here, yes. In Japan, Lolita fashion has nothing to do with sexualizing children. It's a Victorian-inspired street fashion.
Right.
Big hoop skirts, bonnets, lace, parasols. It's about dressing like an immaculate porcelain doll. It's actually very modest. You're generally covered from neck to ankle.
So the Japanese government sends Aoki Misako out in full Victorian dress to, negotiate trade treaties?
Well, to attend cultural festivals, to give speeches, to be the literal face of Japan abroad. But here's the major critique of this program. The government completely flattened these subcultures.
Flatten them how?
Take the Lolita fashion.
Yeah.
On the actual streets of Tokyo, that style can be very dark. There is gothic Lolita, black lace, crucifixes, heavy, dramatic makeup.
It's edgy.
It's often about introversion, about actively protecting oneself from the male gaze by becoming a living doll that you cannot touch.
It's armor. It's a way of saying, I am not for you.
Exactly. It's almost grotesque in its excess sometimes. But the government, they only presented the sweet Lolita version. Pinks, whites, soft frills, they completely sanitized it. They took all the edge off the rebellion to make it perfectly palatable for a global audience.
And what about the schoolgirl ambassador? That feels even riskier, given the existing fetishes involved with that imagery.
It's the ultimate paradox of this whole campaign. The government was aggressively promoting this schoolgirl aesthetic abroad as a symbol of innocent, pure Japan. But at home, at the exact same time, they were aggressively policing actual schoolgirls.
Really?
Yes, there was a massive moral tanic going on about the Kogyaru.
Kogyaru. Okay, those are the girls with the deep tans, the bleached hair, and the loose socks, right?
Yes, the Jairu subculture. They were highly rebellious. They were loud. They were intentionally modifying their uniforms to be shorter, wearing those massive loose socks glued to their calves.
I remember seeing pictures of that. It was such a distinct look.
And the domestic media hated them. They associated them with compensated dating, which is basically a form of prostitution and general moral decay. So you have the state actively punishing the real girls for being rebellious, while simultaneously exporting a sanitized fantasy version of their outfit to sell cool Japan to the West.
That is a classic case of wanting the aesthetic, but not the people behind it. It's like, we like your uniform, we just don't like the girl inside it.
And this leads us to the core concept that binds this all together on a geopolitical level, Joseph Nye's concept of soft power.
I've heard the term thrown around a lot, but break it down for us in this specific context.
So hard power is coercion. Do what I want or I'll sanction you or I'll invade you. That's missiles, tanks, and embargoes. Soft power is attraction. Do what I want because you actually want to be like me. You admire my movies, you love my food, you think my culture is incredibly cool.
And Japan needed soft power because, the hard power route ended in a literal mushroom cloud in 1945.
Exactly. Japan is constitutionally forbidden from having offensive military capabilities. So soft power wasn't just a nice-to-have public relations boost, it was the only avenue for global influence they had left.
Wow.
But there's a very specific flavor to Japan's soft power. In the literature, it's called mukokuseki. It roughly translates to nationlessness or lacking nationality.
Yeah.
Think about your average anime character. Huge eyes, often blue or green, hair that is pink or purple or bright blonde, facial structures that are highly minimal. Do they actually look Japanese?
Really? If you watch Pokemon, Ash Ketchum doesn't look like a kid from downtown Tokyo. He looks totally ambiguous.
He is culturally odorless. He could be American, he could be French, he could be anything. And this was a massive strategic advantage.
Because it removes the friction.
Yes. It allowed Japanese culture to permeate global markets, including sensitive places like China or Korea or even the US, without triggering that anti-Japanese sentiment that was still lingering from the war. It's a way of being Japanese without being Japanese.
It's a stealth export. Yeah.
And it's interesting to compare this to the UK's Cool Britannia movement under Tony Blair.
Right, the whole Spice Girls Oasis era.
Exactly. The UK did something very similar, aggressively pushing their music and fashion. But the UK model was heavily focused on domestic jobs, wealth creation inside Britain.
Building up their own industries.
Right. Japan's Cool Japan, however, was almost entirely focused on external branding. It was outward-facing. It was driven by a desperate, almost existential need to be liked by the rest of the world.
It sounds like a kid who was the school bully, got expelled, came back, and decided to become the class clown or the most helpful student, just so people would stop hating him.
That is a heartbreakingly accurate analogy. But here is the real twist in all of this. We've been talking about the government using this aesthetic, but Kawaii itself didn't start in a boardroom in Kasumigaseki. It started on the streets, and it started as a legitimate, angry rebellion.
This is the part that surprised me the most when I was preparing for this deep dive, because I think most people assume Kawaii is just, you know, traditional Japanese femininity on steroids. Just be quiet, be small, be pretty.
It's actually the exact opposite, or at least it was when it started in the 1970s.
I actually found this incredible story that I really want to share. It's about a woman who was actually there on the ground back in the 70s.
Text.
So this woman wrote an account of being a teenager hanging out in Harajuku around 1974. And she describes the atmosphere not as cute in the way we think of it, but as a literal riot.
A stylistic riot.
Yeah. She and her friends started wearing these oversized pastel clothes. She said they looked almost like toddler clothes. But the real act of rebellion, the thing that really kicked it off, was their handwriting.
Yes, Maruiji, the round writing controversy.
Exactly. She describes sitting in class, holding a mechanical pencil, which was this brand new, very cool gadget at the time, and she started writing horizontally from left to right instead of the traditional vertical top to bottom.
Which is already a huge break from tradition.
And she was intentionally making all the characters round, bubbly. She was putting little hearts over the eyes, adding stars and smiley faces into the text.
To really understand why this was such a massive rebellion, you have to understand the traditional Japanese education system. Traditional calligraphy is incredibly rigid.
Right.
It requires a specific posture. The stroke order of the characters is practically sacred. The way you write is seen as a direct reflection of your inner discipline and your moral character.
Right. And these young girls were basically taking that discipline and just throwing it out the window. She said the teachers went absolutely ballistic. Schools officially banned this handwriting. They claimed it was illegible, which she said wasn't even true. The teachers just stubbornly refused to read it. They called it a complete breakdown of the Japanese spirit.
It was a full-blown moral panic. But for the girls, as this woman explains perfectly, it was a conscious refusal to grow up. The mandate for women in post-war Japan was Ryakusai Kenbo, good wife, wise mother. You study, you get married, you manage the household finances, and you raise the next generation of dedicated corporate warriors. That was your entire allotted role.
And these girls looked at that predetermined future and just said, no thanks. By writing like children, by dressing like children, they were visually screaming, I refuse to enter your system. I am going to stay a girl forever.
It was a strike, a maturity strike.
But the tragedy is, in the second half of her story, she talks about her daughter who is working today.
This is where the story turns dark.
Her daughter works in a modern PR firm in Tokyo right now.
Yeah.
And to survive in that corporate environment, the daughter has to be kawaii.
It's mandatory.
She has to artificially pitch her voice up an octave when she answers the phone. She has to act slightly ditzy or submissive around her male bosses. She has to wear the cute aesthetic. not to rebel, but literally just to keep her job.
The rebellion became the uniform.
She writes that her daughter comes home completely exhausted. She's constantly performing this cuteness because if she acts like a competent, serious adult woman, she's immediately labeled as scary or unlikable.
We call this buriko. It literally translates to fake child. It's a calculated performance of incompetence. And this is the dark side of the whole survival strategy we're talking about.
It trickles down.
Yes. If the nation survives globally by acting cute and harmless, then the women within that nation are forced to do the exact same thing domestically. If you are powerless, you are safe. If you're powerful, you are a target.
That is such a devastating evolution, going from I won't be a mother to I must act like a fake child just to get a paycheck.
Capitalism is incredibly good at eating rebellion. You mentioned the stationery earlier. When that handwriting controversy happened, companies like Sanrio didn't ban it.
No.
They looked at it and said, wait, we can sell this. They took that bubbly font and printed it on millions of pencil cases and notebooks. They monetized the resistance almost immediately.
Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate icon of powerlessness, the face that launched a billion pencil cases. Hello, Kitty.
The cat with no mouth.
We touched on this in the intro, but let's go really deep on the design. Why is the no mouth thing so psychologically effective? Is it just a minimalist design choice?
It's so much more than minimalism. It's entirely about projection. If Hello Kitty had a smile, she would be permanently happy. If you were having a terrible day and you looked at a smiling cat, there's emotional friction there.
She'd be mocking your sadness.
Exactly. But with no mouth, she is a blank canvas. If you are sad, she somehow looks sad with you. If you are happy, she looks happy. She is a mirror. She demands absolutely nothing from you emotionally.
She's the perfect listener because she physically can't talk back.
And look at her limbs. She has no fingers, just these soft little nubs. She can't grab anything. She can't scratch you. She certainly can't hold a gun.
She's helpless.
She is biologically engineered in a graphic design sense to trigger what scientists call the baby schema. Big round head, eyes set very low on the face, short, clumsy limbs. It bypasses logic and directly triggers a mammalian caretaking response in the human brain. You instinctively want to protect her.
And this leads right into that term mo. I see this word everywhere in the forums and articles about this, but I feel like I only understand maybe 10% of what it actually means.
Mo. M-O-E. It's arguably one of the most important words for understanding modern Japanese pop culture.
Yeah.
It literally comes from a verb meaning to bud or to sprout, like a plant coming out of the ground. But in subculture slang, it means a burning, almost overwhelming affection for a fictional character.
So it just means you really, really like them.
It's deeper than just liking. It's a very specific desire to protect them precisely because they are vulnerable. You don't feel mo for Superman. He doesn't need you. You feel mo for the clumsy girl who trips and drops her toast. You feel mo for the shy, malfunctioning robot.
So vulnerability is the actual hook.
Exactly. And there's a prominent cultural theorist named Azuma Hiroki who talks about this concept called database consumption. He argues that fans today aren't even consuming narratives or stories anymore. They are just consuming mo elements.
Mo elements, like ingredients in a recipe.
Cat ears, maid outfits, an eye patch, bandages, extreme clumsiness, a slight lisp. These are all database triggers. Creators just assemble characters of these pre-tested elements to guarantee a dopamine hit in the target audience. It's literally like engineering a drug.
It's monetized vulnerability. You are paying for the feeling of being needed.
And it's not just applied to female characters either. There is a fascinating parallel drawn to male idols. Look at the massive talent agency Johnny's and Associates. They churn out these incredibly popular boy bands. But even when these guys are in their 30s or even 40s, they are strictly marketed as shonen eternal boys.
They aren't allowed to have girlfriends, right?
Right.
Or at least they can never be seen with one publicly.
Right. If they get caught, it's a huge scandal. They have to rigorously maintain an empty private life so the fans can project their own fantasies onto them.
Wow.
Whether it's a desire to date them romantically or a desire to mother them and take care of them, it's the exact same psychological mechanism as Hello Kitty. Be a blank slate, be completely harmless, be perpetually available.
It's terrifying to think about this psychology applied to a whole country. Be harmless, be available. It sounds exactly like the psychology of a victim.
Or the psychology of a very smart survivor who figured out exactly how to manipulate the bully. But here's where the friction really starts to heat up. Because not everyone in Japan is on board with this Hello Kitty national identity. There is a whole other part of Japan that distinctly remembers the sword.
The samurai.
The samurai. And that clash between the sword and the ribbon, that is where things get really, really complicated.
You know, when we talk about Japan from the outside, we often act like it's just one monolithic culture. But there's a story I found that highlights this deep split in the national soul perfectly.
Oh, the Kyoto family story. I know exactly the one. This one is almost cinematic.
Yeah, it really is. So picture a very traditional wooden house in Kyoto. You have a grandfather and a grandson living together under the same roof. The grandfather spent his entire professional career as a set designer for Jidegeki.
And we should probably pause to define that properly for everyone. Jidegeki are Japanese period dramas, basically samurai films and television shows.
Like Seven Samurai.
Think Seven Samurai or Yojimbo, but also the endless daily TV serials set in the Edo period. It's all about rigid honor, bloody sword fights, top knots, and a very strict, highly masculine code of ethics.
It's the quintessential old Japan. And then living in the same house, you have the grandson. He works as a modern character designer for a gaming and marketing company, but he specifically specializes in Yuruchara.
Which translates to loose characters or wobbly characters. These are those incredibly cute, ubiquitous mascots you see representing local prefectures, towns, or specific brands. They are extremely soft and usually badly drawn on purpose to look amateurish and highly approachable.
So the story goes, they're having dinner. The grandfather is looking over the grandson's work, probably a sketch of a smiling rice ball with legs or something, and he's visibly disgusted.
He hates it.
He sees it as a complete feminization of the culture. He feels that the country has entirely lost its dignity and its spine.
To him, the samurai represents ultimate discipline and strength. The mascot represents nothing but weakness and pandering.
But the grandson fights back. He tells the grandfather that the Jidegeki films are a dangerous delusion. He essentially says, you're glorifying a brutal feudal past that literally led us to ruin. That so-called strength is exactly what got Tokyo firebombed to ashes. My mascots actually make people smile. They bring in tourist revenue. They are peaceful.
It's such a brutal argument because, honestly, both of them are right and both of them are wrong. My read on this is that both the samurai and the mascot are actually masks.
So,
the grandfather is desperately trying to reclaim lost power through a romanticized past. He wants to live in a fantasy where Japan is still a strong, feared warrior nation.
right.
The grandson is trying to gain affection and safety through projected innocence. He wants to live in a fantasy where Japan is just a harmless, fun playground. Both of them are actively avoiding the complex, messy reality of the present. They are both wearing costumes.
That's a really profound way to look at it. And this mascot culture, the grandson's world, it really has completely taken over the physical landscape of the country.
It absolutely has. Every single town, every local prison, every tax office, they all have a cute mascot. But the most jarring example, the one that really shows the extreme clash between the samurai and the cute, is the self-defense force.
The military.
Japan's actual military. They have a mascot named Prince Pickles.
Prince Pickles. You have to be joking. Please tell me that's a translation error.
I really wish I could take credit for making that up, but no. Prince Pickles is the official state-sanctioned mascot of the Japanese Ministry of Defense.
Unbelievable.
He is a cute, highly stylized cartoon prince with massive eyes, huge hair, and he is plastered all over their recruitment posters and official materials.
Okay, we have to unpack the psychology of this. You have a military, you have actual tanks,
Yeah.
you have F-35 fighter jets. Why on earth do you need a cute cartoon prince?
It all goes back to the post-war Constitution, specifically Article 9. Japan officially renounced the sovereign right to wage war. They technically do not even have an army, they have a self-defense force.
It's a very careful legal distinction.
So how do you market a highly advanced military that legally isn't supposed to ever fight?
You make it look like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Exactly. You rebrand it completely. You make it about disaster relief. You make it about helping kittens out of trees. You make it Prince Pickles. It completely softens the intimidating image of state power.
It's cognitive dissonance.
You put a cute smiling sticker on the side of a heavily armored tank. It somehow doesn't register as a weapon of war anymore. It looks like a toy in a parade.
It's actually kind of brilliant in a deeply terrifying way. It totally disarms the viewer's critical thinking.
It creates a psychological buffer. It makes lethal authority feel totally harmless. And the crazy thing is, it works. The self-defense force has used this strategy incredibly effectively to recruit young people who would never, ever join a hard military, but are perfectly willing to join a friendly peacekeeping team led by a cute little prince.
It's the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. But there is a much darker side to this global strategy, isn't there? We hinted at it earlier, this whole idea of the saved Orient.
This is where we get into the really deep political theory. There is an academic concept that underpins all of this called ontological security. Basically, it asks, how does a nation feel secure in its own fundamental identity?
How does Japan do it?
Well, historically, the West has always viewed the Orient, the East, as feminine, passive, backwards, and something that desperately needs to be saved or civilized by Western powers. This is the core thesis of Orientalism.
Right.
Now, Japan historically tried to fight that stereotype. In the build-up to World War II, they tried to be the ultimate, hyper-masculine, imperialist aggressor to prove they were equal to the West.
And they were utterly destroyed for it.
Yes. So post-war, they flipped the script completely. They decided, if you insist on thinking we're feminine and passive, fine, we will be the absolute best in the world at being feminine and passive.
They just leaned entirely into the stereotype. Instead of saying, we are strong and dangerous, they said, you know what? You're right. We are cute. We are harmless. Look at Hello Kitty. Look at our peaceful, friendly technology.
It creates this massive saved Orient spectacle. By presenting itself globally as this harmless land of cute mascots and pop culture, Japan instantly calms Western anxiety. It constantly signals, we are not a threat to your hegemony anymore.
It's literally like playing possum or playing the innocent little kid so the school bully finally leaves you alone.
And this creates a very useful gap, because while the rest of the world is entirely focused on the cute mascots and the anime, Japan can quietly rebuild its global economy, rebuild its diplomatic ties, and even slowly rebuild its military capacity, like we just saw with Prince Pickles, without ever raising any international alarms.
Because honestly, who is ever going to be afraid of Prince Pickles?
Exactly. But the internal cost of wearing this mask is incredibly high. It means you are constantly, aggressively suppressing the reality of your own history and your own vulnerabilities. And nowhere was this suppression more evident than right after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011.
The meltdown. I remember watching that unfold on the news vividly. It was horrific.
It was a national trauma on an unimaginable scale. But how did the government initially respond in terms of public messaging? They didn't just send out serious engineers in lab coats to explain the risks. They sent out mascots.
Serious?
I am dead serious. They actively used cute, cartoonish mascots to try and explain radiation levels to a terrified public. They had little smiling cartoon atoms on television screens. They literally tried to kawaii-fy the danger of nuclear fallout.
That is genuinely dystopian. I think I've actually seen some of those graphics now that you mention it. It's like, don't worry about the invisible deadly poison in the air. Just look at this happy dancing egg.
It is the ultimate return of the repressed. Kawaii becomes a psychological mechanism to suppress dark, grotesque realities. The war, the atomic bomb, the severe pollution, the nuclear meltdowns.
It covers it all up.
There is a famous contemporary artist named Takashi Murakami who explores this brilliantly. He created this entire art movement called superflat.
Oh, the smiling flowers, right?
You see these vibrant, overwhelmingly cute, smiling flowers. But if you actually look at the context and the history behind his work, they are directly referencing the blinding flash and the trauma of the atomic bomb. It's the visual fusion of the absolute apocalypse and a colorful candy store.
It's a scream completely hidden inside a smile.
And if you look at the official Cool Japan promotional videos that the government released post-Fukushima, they're totally full of this denial. They endlessly mix oishi, delicious food, and kawaii with mirai future technology.
Just to highlight really nice things.
It constructs a complete fantasy land that is mukokuseki, totally nationless and timeless. It aggressively denies the crushing reality of an aging, shrinking population, decades of economic stagnation, and the deep, lingering trauma of the disaster.
It's essentially a hologram of a country. A perfect, cute, entirely harmless hologram, desperately covering up a very real, very scarred physical body.
And it brings us right back to that opening thought we started with. The mask isn't just for fun, it's a tool for survival. But eventually the mask always eats the face.
So where does this leave us at the end of all this? We've gone from teenage girls rebelling with bubbly handwriting in the 70s to the emperor standing next to Mickey Mouse, all the way to the government using cute cats to literally hide nuclear fallout.
We really have to synthesize all these threads. Kawaii started as a genuine scream for freedom, young girls saying, "I refuse to be a domestic soldier for the corporate state." But that scream was captured, it was monetized, and it was turned into a multi-billion-dollar export.
And then the state weaponized it as a diplomatic shield.
Exactly. It all goes back to that opening image we discussed, the removal of the mouth.
the surgical procedure.
Removing the mouth of Hello Kitty isn't just a clever design choice. It is a profound political statement. It represents a Japan that cannot or actively chooses not to speak of its own complex history in a direct adult voice. It overwhelmingly prefers to communicate through the safe, soft, deniable ambiguity of the cute.
It's just safer to be cute than to be real.
Yes, but honestly, we need to turn the mirror around before we wrap this up.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we tend to look at Japan's cute culture from the outside and ask, why are they so obsessed with acting like children? But perhaps the more unsettling question is for us, the consumers in the West.
Us.
We are the ones who eagerly embraced the mouthless cat and the harmless mascot. We rewarded Japan with billions of dollars and full diplomatic acceptance, but only when they finally put on the mask of total powerlessness.
Oh.
It makes you realize that Kawaii isn't just a reflection of Japan's soul. It's a mirror reflecting our own deep-seated desire to dominate and pacify the things we fear.
That is something that is going to keep me up at night. The realization that we actively demanded the mask just to feel comfortable.
And they were just smart enough and desperate enough to wear it.
Incredible. This has been a truly mind-blowing deep dive. From the streets of Harajuku to the highest halls of power. Thank you so much for walking us through all of this.
It was my absolute pleasure. It's a fascinating, if slightly disturbing world to uncover.
We'll see you next time.